Put it on your calendar. So our guest speaker today is the mayor of Crestwood, Jim Kramer, and he's going to come up and tell us everything new about Crestwood.
Thank you, Ms. Bobby. So, I don't know, can y'all hear me? Is that for the Zoom? Okay, good. Is it, and I'm in? Okay, perfect. Just make sure we're good. So thank you all for inviting me. Again, my name is Jim Kramer. I've met obviously several of you. So I thought it'd be good if I kind of give you a quick update of kind of how I became the mayor or how this happened. And then we'll talk about what's happened in the last 2 years, 2.5 years since I became mayor. So it's kind of an interesting story. When I was, when my wife and I started to have kids, we realized we wanted to have a big family. We wanted to move out. I grew up in Hikes Point. So we bought a place out here in Oldham County, or we bought a lot, and a friend of mine was helping me build a house on it. We moved out here. We went out here, I don't know, maybe a month and a half, and I started having some drainage issues in my yard. It was a brand new neighborhood called Camden Manor, right next to the driving range. So I found out after we moved in that I was actually part of the city of Park Lake. They had actually annexed that property so we could be in their sewer system, which I didn't know they had a sewer system because I didn't know I was part of their city. So I said, fine. And so I'm like, well, if I've got a drainage issue and I'm part of the city, I'm going to go to the meeting. So I go to the city council meeting just to find out what they're going to tell me. And I got what you would probably expect. A small town. They're like, oh yeah, we'll take care of it. And I was like, well, nothing's going to, that was the end of that conversation. So I thought I better try this again. So I go back the next month and they're like, you know, we've only had one visitor in our city council meetings in the last year. And that was you last month. One of the commissioners was moving out of town. So they said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to put you in that position. And then we're going to assign you the opportunity to fix the problem. Yeah, I'm starting to see something here. So anyway, so I go home, I tell my wife, I said, good news, bad news. The good news is we're going to get the drainage issue fixed. The bad news is they put me on the city council. She kind of rolls her eyes and we move on. So that was in the spring. We moved in February. So in April, I got elected to the city council. And in September or October, the current mayor announced he wasn't running for re-election and nobody else could. So in November, I was put on the ballot as the new mayor of Park Lake. So 8 months after I moved to Oldham County, I'm the mayor of Park Lake, having no clue I was even in the city when I moved out here. Over the next 6 years, we fixed up a couple things, got rid of the drainage issues, got rid of did some lighting studies with LG&E. And MSD came in and said they were wanting to put sewers in Oldham County. It's the first time they'd ever crossed county lines. It was from a governmental perspective, it was a pretty significant deal to take an entity within a county and cross county lines into another county to do work. So we worked with them. We obviously didn't want our own sewer treatment plant. Dennis Dabble was really interested in getting sewers for Crestwood. So he was wanting it done for Crestwood. So he came to me and said, would you be interested in getting rid of your package plant? And I was like, absolutely. So we worked together. We got rid of the sewer treatment plant. Now everything gets pumped straight to MSD. We make all kinds of fun about what just got pumped. But anyway, get all that stuff out of our neighborhood. And so it worked very well. Well, a year later, kind of fast forward, I'm sitting there saying, okay, our city council now, our two biggest events are we going to have a block party and are we going to have a yard sale? It's like, that's really not a city, right? We have no reason to be a city. So having worked with Dennis through this process, I said, it's about time for you to annex Park Lake into Crestwood. There's no reason for us to be a separate city. Again, without going through all the details of our governmental system, taxes can only go up or down a very small amount every year without having to go to a referendum that goes on the ballot. And it's a pretty expensive process. Well, because of the sewer treatment system, we were spending a lot of money on that system. So our taxes were kind of high for a small city. So I couldn't reduce the taxes as much as I wanted to because of the way our laws are structured. So anyway, long story short, I go to Dennis. I said, why don't you annex us in? He agrees. We eliminate the city of Park Lake. We merge into Crestwood. And a week before the merger, he comes to me and says, one of my commissioners is moving out of town. Will you finish his term so that your citizens will have representation in Crestwood when we merge? I said, fine, I'll finish his term. The whole point of merging was that I would kind of lose my job because I really didn't want it. So I said, fine, I'll finish the term. And then I will have served my civic duty. So we merged into Crestwood, and 18 years later, Dennis finally decided he was retiring. I'm not sure what happened somewhere in there. I just kept getting reelected. But anyway, so 26 years after I moved to Oldham County, having absolutely zero intent of ever doing anything political, I have now been elected for 25 and a half years. And I was elected as the mayor a little over 2 years ago. So that's a little bit of a backstory of how I very unexpectedly ended up at this meeting today. But it's been a wonderful ride. For those of you who knew Dennis, he was the mayor for 48 years. He started when the city was 2 years old, back in 72. And basically he grew and kind of helped facilitate a lot of the things that happened. And one of the things that I tell people a lot of times, because when governmental people get involved, more times than not, you hear all the stories and all the bad things and all the complaints, and everybody wants to complain about something, and it happens. And I absolutely get my fair share of complaints. But I have to say, for every complaint I get, I probably get 4 thank yous, which is kind of cool, because everybody always assumes that it's a thankless job. And it really has been. I think that part of it is people like you all, like the Rotary and the Lions Club. Everybody appreciates what it takes to make a city great. And it's not a government and it's not anything else. It's the people, and we all have to work together to get things done. And so because there are so many great groups out here, I really do feel like everybody's kind of got my back, and it's a lot easier to get things accomplished than I would see that somewhere else. If I had to do the things that my brother does, I have a brother who's on Louisville's Metro Council. And if I had to do the stuff he does, there's no way I would be doing this, because it's a constant struggle for him. Anyway, so talk a little bit. Let me tell you a little bit about what's been happening since I've taken over as mayor. Obviously, you all know of the Maples Park. You all have done a tremendous amount of work in there. When I took over as mayor, we were talking about the splash pad and the playground, which I'm sure you've all seen how those turned out. They turned out wonderful. Unfortunately, we finished, and I received kind of the completion documents from the builders 2 weeks after the governor shut down the state. So we were never able to turn on our splash pad. We turned it on for one day in the fall just to make sure it would work after we got the papers and stuff. But we've never been able to actually turn it on. We're going to be doing that in about 3 weeks. So we're going to have the first splash pad in the county will be open to the public. We're kind of watching the weather, and we're going to try to get it tested in the next two or 3 weeks, but it'll definitely be done before Memorial Day. So we'll have it open here pretty soon. So that's an exciting thing. Technically, we've never even opened the playground. Now, that was kind of a funny one, because again, when they finished it, the first thing we had to do was put fencing around this brand new playground that everybody wanted to play on, and have fences blocking it for the first 4 months. And when we finally got permission to take the fencing down just to see what would happen, the day the group showed up to start taking the fencing down, Facebook exploded with posts. And by the time the guys were finished putting the fence on the trucks, there were already 25 or 30 kids on the playground. So it was crazy how quickly. And every day when I go by, it doesn't matter if it's 50 degrees and windy, there are kids on that playground. So it has truly been a blessing for the community. And again, I hope all of you have kids or grandkids that have been out there, or at a minimum, just walking through the park. It really has turned out to be very well. The event space that's there, and I believe that's where you all are going to be meeting for your meeting in a couple of weeks. So I don't know if any of you all noticed or kind of heard the story. When we first started looking at that old dairy barn, anybody remember the Sears and Roebuck's kits? That was actually a Sears and Roebuck's barn kit. Now they had a standard, a premium, and a deluxe. And of course, Mr. Finelli bought the most expensive, the deluxe kit. But you could still see in the beams where the notches were, where they were actually color coded, so that when you bought it, it showed up on a flatbed, and you just literally assembled the parts, and they were color coded. It was a color coded beam set, and you built the Sears and Roebuck's barn kit. So it was the nice kit. The problem was we wanted to turn it into the event space. Have any of you been in this space yet? A couple people. Okay. Rich asked. A couple people have been in it, but when we built the space, when we first walked in the old barn, again, it was a Sears and Roebuck dairy barn. So you walk in and you've got a hayloft at 9 feet or 8.5 feet, and the barn floor was concrete, and there were ramps where you would bring the cows in. It really wasn't a good space for anything. So to fix it, we would have had to take out the hayloft. Well, as soon as you do, the building's going to squat, because that's what's holding the walls together. So it's like, okay, now we're going to have to put these cables in there, and then we have to take out the floor. It was going to cost us about $100,000 more to try to turn that into an event space than it would have cost us to start over. And if it would have been of historic value, we would have kept it, kind of like the Parish Implements building, some of the other buildings we were hanging on to. We felt that there really was no value in keeping an old dairy barn. So we found a group down in Alabama who wants those barns and keeps them. They came up, they physically disassembled it, put it on flatbeds, drove it down to Alabama and rebuilt it. So that barn is now in full function in Alabama. I don't know exactly where, but somewhere. And for us in the Crestwood, we took it down, we took out the pad and we started over. We built a 4-season event space that you all will all get to see in a couple of weeks. And for those who've seen it, I think it turned out just incredibly well. And it was only fitting that we named our event space, our meeting space, after the previous mayor who had been mayor forever. So it is the Dennis Dibble event barn. So for those who haven't seen it, there's a plaque on the front of it. And I think you'll all enjoy the way it turned out when you get over there. So that's kind of what's happened at the park, the big events and the big items that we've done. The only thing that's left at the park, again, you all have done a tremendous amount of work for us, and we truly do appreciate all the trees and all the other activities and the restoration of the boys' playhouse and the girls' playhouse, and just all the things you all have done. We really appreciate. The Lions Club has also been involved and built a few things for us. So again, community involvement has been very helpful for us in that. So we are at this point basically done with the park. We're not going to do anything else, with one maybe exception. We're looking at putting in an earthen amphitheater on one of the hills, so that we don't want to have this big structure that doesn't look like it fits. We just want to use the lay of the land and build an amphitheater into it. So we're looking at designs right now to see if we can do that easily, tying it into the Art Center. Since we have the Art Center right across the street, we had Shakespeare in the Park. They did their very first performance post-COVID on Saturday. It wasn't the best weather, but we had about 150 people show up to see it. So we're definitely getting some, first event ever to get that kind of crowd we were pretty pleased with. So anyway, the last thing we're going to do is the amphitheater and the park will be kind of finished. We do know that we have a parking issue, and that is that when it's 60 degrees and cloudy, we have no parking. So I can't imagine what it's going to look like this summer. But what we've been able to do is use the space next to the park as a temporary parking lot. We put in a gravel lot a couple of weeks ago. So we have plenty of parking now if anybody wants to go over there. So anyway, so I've kind of worked my way around the big projects in the city. So that's the park itself. The land next to it, as you all may or may not know, several businesses were there. Christian Brothers Plumbing, Spring Puckett had a house. There was the KOI Auto Parts. All those properties over the years, Parish Implements, we have been able to acquire those different properties and build or purchase all that land, so that we now have another 7 acres right next to the park that we can turn into something. And the something is still being determined. But the goal is to kind of expand upon the park and create a nice environment for people next to it. Stepping across the road there, as Miss Bobby commented about, there was an old IGA building that had been vacant for 10 plus years, and it leaked for 20 years before that. And the building in front of it, which, you know, was very shortly after I became mayor. I had been mayor maybe 3 months, and I started looking at what was going on and knowing that building was an eyesore. And it just, we've all heard the stories or the analogies of the broken window syndrome. If you have a house with broken windows in it, the other windows get broken, and it just kind of, it goes with what's around you. So when you look at those properties and I saw the state of disrepair of the IGA building and the state of disrepair of the building in front of it, it really made it difficult to grow Crestwood into something other than just a dilapidated downtown. So when I heard that the Oldham County was looking at potentially moving the courthouse temporarily, and they were looking for a space, I thought, what a great opportunity. So I talked to the Stesses and inquired about what they're going to do with the building. He had some ideas about who could potentially rent it. I thought this was a better tenant for the city than some of the ones that he was talking to. And I was able to work out the deal, and without going through the whole story with the county and the state, obviously we were successful. We were able to convince everybody that it made sense to bring the courthouse to Crestwood temporarily. So the thought and the goal of that was, there's a couple things we really wanted to do. One is, again, when I moved out to Oldham County, what I realized very quickly is, if I wanted to do something, I usually had to get in my car and drive back to Jefferson County because there wasn't a whole lot of family friendly things to do. There wasn't much for the family out here. So I wanted to have something that was a little more family friendly. And that's kind of what the goal is for that center, is to try to turn it into something that creates more family friendly, more reasons to stay in the county or in the city. Now, obviously the park will do that. The thinking behind putting the courthouse here temporarily was every person in the county today, if they're not going to stay in LaGrange or Prospect or Goshen, they're going to get in their car and they're going to drive to Jefferson County to get something to eat or to go do whatever they're going to do. For the next 3.5 years, every person who needs a new driver's license is going to drive to Crestwood. Every person who needs to take a driving test, like my son, will be doing that in Crestwood. So we're going to have a lot of people who would normally either drive right past Crestwood on 71 or maybe cut through Crestwood when there's an accident on 71. Those people will actually be coming here for a good reason instead of blocking traffic. So the goal is to really create an opportunity for the entire county to see what we have to offer. They will now stop at that courthouse. They'll get their driver's license. They'll realize that we have restaurants all around here, some really good restaurants in Crestwood. They'll also realize that the park's across the street, and it should generate some great excitement and energy for Crestwood and kind of build some environment around us. Just real quick, how long am I supposed to talk?
You can talk till 8:30.
Okay.
And then you can stick around if you want.
Okay.
If you have questions.
Because I could talk all day. I just want to make sure I know what my timeline is. So, anyway, so that was kind of our thinking behind the turning that courthouse out, turning that IGA into a courthouse. Not to mention it makes the place look a little bit better. So it was kind of funny on that. I went across the street the day after we bought it, and I walked into the hardware store, and I don't know how many of y'all know Jimmy over at the hardware store, but I walked in, I said, you're about to have the ugliest building in town. And he looked at me kind of funny. He said, did you buy it? I said, yeah. So within a few weeks, they started talking, and you notice they paved the parking lot. They striped the parking lot. They're starting to talk about fixing. It's same as the broken window. If you have if everybody else starts improving, now you got the ugliest building. Nobody wants to have the ugliest building in town, right? Most people don't want to have the ugliest building in town. But anyway, so we're starting to see excitement. We're starting to see things changing and people making some improvements in the downtown corridor. So as soon as we finished with that building, as soon as we finished past tense, we started working on the front building. And again, we did something that hadn't been done in a very long time, is we made the building dry. So we put a new roof on the whole front building. All those tenants are just incredibly excited to have the changes that are happening right now. It is now public knowledge. It hasn't really hit the papers a whole lot yet, but it is official that the Oldham County Public Library, the South Oldham Library, which is little bitty right next to our current driver's license center, isn't sufficient for them, and they know it. So we have officially entered into negotiations to turn the old Stess Manor into a 2,700 or 27,000 square foot library system. So we will have quite a bit going on in that space. They'll have event spaces, they'll have activity areas. Obviously they'll have books and things for checkout, but we're in the process of designing what that will look like, completely redoing that whole space. As part of that, we're going to wrap the building too. So we're going to put a new facade around the building and really make that a kind of an upscale space. So now that I've got a new roof, I can put sides on it. So that's the next thing we're going to do, is work on that. So that's a pretty exciting process that's coming very soon. You'll be seeing that work starting to happen over the next few months. I'm trying to think what other the other big event is right down the road here. We were talking about a winery. That whole stretch of Old LaGrange Road is now having conversations with us about joining into the city. I don't know if Crestwood's city limits are kind of funny looking. It's not like a big circle, but South Oldham Fire Department is the edge of Crestwood today on that side of the street. On the other side, it goes much further down, but the Artist and Distillery, Third Turn, Udell Gardens have all approached the city about joining actually into the city officially, so they can join our sewer system and be part of the city environment. So we're working with them right now for some expansion to possibly add that into the city and provide sewers for Old LaGrange Road, which again, from the city's perspective, is pretty exciting. Now we're going to be able to say we have a distillery within the city limits. We already have a gun range in the city limits. So now let's get some, some bourbon in there and, a brewery, and a botanical garden. We might as well go with, we'll get everybody, hopefully we can help everybody out at some level. So, but anyway, so that's kind of the last thing that we're working on right now. And I could talk about a whole lot of other smaller projects, but that's really the big projects that have happened. And it's funny, I sit there and I keep getting frustrated with how slow things move. My background is I'm an electrical engineer by training, and I own an IT company. So I do IT design, IT consulting. I design big multi-office location networks, and that's my world. Is it's about how fast can you get it done the right way. It's about doing it right, but you got to do it. It's a fast-paced world. And then I get into government, and I'm like, okay, well, let's get this done. And I'm like, well, we got to have a meeting next week, and then if it gets approved, it goes to another committee in 2 weeks, and then a month later we have a second reading, and I'm like, oh, I can't believe this takes so long. It's so frustrating for me. But then I stop and I look back and I'm like, okay, I was elected mayor 2 years ago. And in 2 years, we bought a building, remodeled the building, turned it into a courthouse, moved the courthouse in, got another building, gutted the building, put a roof on it, got a contract or got a agreement with the library to do the library. Oh yeah, we built an event space in the park. So a lot has happened in the last 2.5 years. Probably good that it moves slower than I want, because I'd probably overwhelm a lot of people. I know Rich has helped me out with some IT services at the park, and I probably drive him crazy because I expect things to happen. And I guess in IT, Rich does too, but it's a fast-paced world. And so I think it's good that the government slows me down a little bit, but we're making good progress. So those are the big things that are happening in Crestwood right now. I don't know if y'all do I have a few minutes for questions?
I want to know about the liquor store, grocery store that is looking terrible forever.
It is. You're right. Yeah, I think it's Sunoco at this point. They've changed 3 times, but yes, the Marathon.
Who owns that, and why isn't it fixed?
So the gentleman who owns it, the guy who owns it has decided he wanted to upgrade his facility. Obviously, you see he started. Planning and zoning was actually at our city council meeting this month to talk to us about it, because we've had a lot of complaints. We just had a lot of complaints. Basically, what happened, according to planning and zoning, is he started expanding and he didn't have a valid building permit. So they did a cease and desist because he has to have a valid building permit. And now they went back to him. He has started the process. He asked for a building permit after the fact. What he asked for wasn't what was already built. So now there's some discussion. So they have now told him he has to repair everything, and he has to apply for a new building permit and get it approved. And once it's been approved, he can build. But what he has already built is not legitimate. It's not legal. It doesn't meet building codes. So this is all information that came out at our city council meeting when planning and zoning was there. So basically at this point, they have given him a letter stating he has to apply for a new building permit. If not, they will start code enforcement against him for not making the completion. Unfortunately, people in building will understand, sometimes it takes a long time to build and sometimes it's quick. And so there is no state statute or no law that says you have to build something in a certain amount of time. You build it at the speed you build it. And so we can't legally go in and say it's taking you too long to build your building. You have to build faster. You have to slow down or go faster. That's not something we can do. And I would think, all of us, if you think it from the other side, if you're remodeling your house, you don't want somebody coming in there and telling you, the speed at which you want, they want you to do the work. So from that perspective, while it's unfortunate, it's ugly, we don't like it, there's really nothing we can do as long as he's complying with the laws. Now, at this point, he's not in compliance with the law. So we are able to go back with some enforcement opportunities and say, these are the things you have to do, or we can condemn the space because it's technically, you do not have a certificate of occupancy to be in that space. And therefore you have to leave the building. So there are some things we can do at this point to force his hand to get something done because he no longer has a valid building code or building permit. So we are in the process right now working with planning and zoning to encourage him to get a valid building permit or to basically claim that it is a unsafe environment to be working in, and which will then force him to either move out or complete the work. So we are able to do that at this point. But yeah, if he would have maintained a valid building permit, unfortunately, there's not a whole lot we can do. Very frustrating. That's one of those frustrating parts of my job.
You didn't want to tell him you had that ugliest building in Crestwood?
I did. Oh, I did. No,
He didn't really care.
he did. He did not. He told me he was going to have the prettiest building in Crestwood when he finished with his remodel. So he was fixing it. He did care. Well, he told me he cared. He was going to make it the prettiest building in town.
Does he live in Crestwood?
No, he does not. Yes.
Just a word, why violate building code, don't do it in the busiest street in the town.
Yeah. Isn't that the truth?
No discussion of Crestwood is complete without a comment on Railroad Avenue.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that one always seems to come up. So in 2020, we had 57 semis get stuck on the crossings. So we're averaging more than one a week. I think 3 actually got split in half last year. So we have done quite a bit to try to address the issue. And I'll tell you that that's a very challenging problem in that several things. One, it's technically Railroad Avenue is a state road. And the CSX is the National Railroad Association is just, you talk about governmental bureaucracies. It's a very difficult group to get anything accomplished with. So technically the city of Crestwood has no control or jurisdiction there because it's a state road and a federal railroad. That being said, it's been such an issue that I requested and got a meeting with the city of Crestwood, the Oldham county engineer, planning and zoning, as well as the state Kentucky Department of Transportation and CSX. And we all met up in LaGrange in the big boardroom and went through all of the challenges, all of the problems. The railroad's solution is we just close the crossing. That fixes the problem. I'm like, well, it fixes your problem, but it creates a nightmare for everybody else. Because if you go back, and I've learned a lot through this process. 50 years ago, the railroad crossing actually went straight across at Floydsburg Road, and it was flat. They moved it and put that S-turn in Railroad Avenue so they would have a queuing to hold cars so cars didn't get backed up on 22 when cars were trying to cross the tracks or when there was a train. So that's why they actually moved it down to allow for that queuing. The challenge that we have is all of that is state and CSX. And if they were to close that crossing, all that traffic would now go to the crossing across from the Circle K, and there's nowhere for them to queue cars there. So now 146 and 22, where they crisscross on the other side of the school, would be just an absolute nightmare on both sides. And everybody knows that. So then the next thing they said was, well, just close them both. You've got an underpass. Use it. That won't work. So when we went to the meeting, I actually took pictures from I don't know when it was 68, when there were 66, when there was an accident on the tracks. I don't remember. In the mid 60s, there was a derailment, and I have pictures of the derailment. So I took that picture and I stood in the front of PNC's parking lot in roughly the same place as Crestwood National Bank was, and took a picture today. And you can see the track is almost 5 feet taller today than it was 50 years ago. And talking to CSX, what they said is every time they come in and take out railroad ties, put new railroad ties in, add the rock and stamp it, they add roughly an inch to an inch and a half to the track. Well, an inch a year for 50 years, 4.5 feet, right? So we've raised the tracks 5 feet. So now what used to be a 1 foot crossing is now a 5 to 6 foot crossing, and that's what's causing the trucks to get stuck. So with that information, we have requested CSX fix the problem, lower the track to where it used to be. And, maybe it takes them 10, 20 years. Every year we'll have less accidents until we get it flush again. I was told that would be a multi-million-dollar project and not in CSX's budget. So I went, again, the state was there as well. The state said they don't have the funding either. So they suggested maybe we just make 22 a 3-lane road instead of a 2-lane road so we can queue for traffic and send everybody across at Circle K and close it. So we are working diligently with all the different groups. I've actually had conversations with Jason Nemes and Karen Berg, our 2 state senators, about that situation to try to figure out if we can get the state involved to help with that. So I am continuing to push in every different direction I can to get something accomplished. Unfortunately, as much as I'm pushing and challenging and trying to get something accomplished, we really have no, officially we have no stick to kind of go at it because it's not our road. It's not our railroad. Nothing is ours. So we've talked about putting a barrier over the road that semis can't get through, put out like a crossing so that they have to stop. I was told that it's a state road and you can't block that. And if they hit that pole and knock it down and somebody gets hurt, it's a city responsibility because that pole legally can't block a car. So we would be responsible for any damage to the truck and any injuries on the ground. So we're not allowed to put anything to block traffic from coming across. We have to allow them to go over. A box truck is roughly the same height as a semi, and they can make the crossing. So for me to put a bar over there would stop a box truck from crossing, and they have the right to. Yeah.
So question, have we considered putting in a designated turnaround? Because what happens if trucks get in there and they don't feel like they have any option and or they don't see the big sign that says don't go over railroad traffic? That's flashing at them. But if you did combine that with a designated turnaround,
Yeah.
I've had that conversation with a trucker before, and he says, well, the GPS is messing them up because they all follow that little thing
I know.
and all that stuff. So there's actually a thing you can buy called truckers.
Yep.
And they all need to upgrade to it.
That's right.
But with that said, maybe big old sign says designated turnaround. You might have to do something with the ice maker.
Yep.
But there's room there to do it.
There is. And yes, that has come up. The challenge is that space is starting next year. We're intending to turn that into a commercial space. So we're going to be building in that within the next couple of years that we're going to be building that out is part of the challenge. But yes, we've talked about that. We've even gone to Garmin and several of the GPS manufacturers to try to get them. We've identified that we've changed the status of that road from an arterial road to a feeder or from that steps down to a feeder. And the next one is like a community road or something. We've actually had it reclassified as the lowest level to prevent the GPSs from sending people there. So we're doing everything we can to try to prevent. The other thing we're working on right now is you've probably seen traffic lights where instead of having a cable that goes across the street, it's just on a big arm that sticks out, the traffic lights are. So we're looking at putting an arm in, and I'm working with the county engineer to do some stuff working. We got to get some easements to put the support structure in, but having an arm that sticks up, and it would be high enough that a semi will go under it, but having basically cables that hang down with balls on them or like rubber balls of some sort so that the semi will see it. It will hit the semi, but it's just a ball on a string. But again, it's something that's visually in the driver's line of sight. They'll see that. Hopefully at that point, they'll realize this is a warning, and then they'll see the 4 foot by 8 foot sign with flashing lights on it.
Even if you put those roads up there, you could always flip that one way. Everybody would hate losing their shortcut,
Yes.
but you could always flip that one way.
We have talked about making that a one way. That's also come up. So again, we are doing a lot of different things right now, looking at how we can prevent the issues. So right now, the thing that we're looking at is, again, having the big, I think that's our number one option is putting just a pole up with big balls on it and a sign that says, you won't make it, or something, I want to be kind of funny, but I gotta be careful what I say on there, but something to grab the driver's attention when they start to turn. Before they turn, they're going to see this big bright yellow balls that are going to hit them in the face.
So wherever that is, there'll be a place immediately after that they can do something.
Well, it'll be before they turn. It'll be before they turn.
It'll be before they
When they're at the traffic light, we're going to have it right at the traffic light. Basically, there will be a curtain of bright yellow balls 12 feet off the ground, 10 feet off the ground, so that they can't turn without seeing it.
Those things will probably get wrapped up into the housing on our trucks. So when we go to do that, we might want to, you let me know.
Okay.
Just out of curiosity, because we have, we're 13 feet.
Yeah.
And we can make it.
Yeah.
But and I'm talking about concrete trucks.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but we also got those, basically you got, railing up there.
Yeah.
Stuff like that might be an issue.
Well, yeah, we'll obviously look at this is something they're using down in Texas in several places. And I'm oversimplifying. It's like a rubber tube that comes down that's semi-rigid with they'll just basically just lift up. It's like a curtain. It'll lift the curtain. So I would absolutely let you look at it.
Nothing so abrasive. It's going to be scratching.
No, just it'll be, again, rubber.
Paint, all that stuff.
Right. And that's the whole point. And the comment was, if we have something like a bar that you would hit and it would damage your truck, I'm liable for the damage to your truck because you hit my bar. It's my fault. So anyway, yeah, we understand that. So we're trying to come up with something, and this is what we have found that is being used in some other states, and it seems to work. So but that's what we're looking at. But yeah, I'd like to show you what we're looking at before we do it. So, but we're waiting right now on easements.
This weekend, you better just go stand out there.
Yeah, physical presence.
We have already had that conversation. Yeah, we've had that conversation with the police to say, when you close 71, if we don't have something stopping semis, we're going to close Crestwood. So yes, we've already had that conversation. Great point. 10 o'clock tonight, from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m.
Road patrol.
Yeah, we are having an over under at what time does the first semi get stuck? There's a fundraiser over under. At what time does first semi get stuck? So anyway, but thank you for bringing up that thorn. It always comes up. Yes, ma'am.
Regarding the church implement area,
Uh-huh.
I would have thought that would have been a better location for the library, close to the park or whatever.
Mhm.
So what plan is it for that?
So we actually talked to the library originally about building a library there. Thanks, Ron. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of, there's the size of the library they wanted would have been a pretty substantial amount of that land. And they're also concerned with building a building from scratch, the cost. It's pretty expensive. Whereas in this case, all they got to do is refurbish the existing building. So they like that as well. We did talk about that, and actually that was one of our first conversations was, do we put the library right up against the park, right on the fence line of the park, was part of our discussion. They really liked the look and feel of that building and felt it was a better fit for them. So what we are doing, and about 10 years ago, we did an initial design for what that space would look like, and we just initiated a revamping of that project last week. So in about 2 months, we're going to have some designs, and I'd be more than happy to share those once we get them. But we're looking at, possibly at like some kind of a promenade, a farmer's market, some local, like maybe a local restaurant or two, some shops, not necessarily downtown LaGrange, but kind of that hometown feel, a community center. Again, we want to have things like a farmer's market so that people have a chance to come gather. But at the same time, we don't want to have, I don't want a Taco Bell and a KFC. We don't, nothing against those restaurants. We're not looking for this to become a commercial, environment. We want it to really be a kind of a home feel of layout, some little shops, but they're designing that right now. They just started. Yes, ma'am.
Do you have any plans for the old IGA building after the courthouse is gone?
We might, but that's still kind of under wraps. I am talking to someone right now who approached me and said it would be ideal for them and explained how, and it would be probably really cool for the city. So I can't really go into details yet, but we do have a potential tenant that would be a perfect tenant for us. And initially we talked about, maybe turning it into a city hall, but we really don't need it. 27,000 square foot city hall. Somebody said it'd be a great place to do like a laser tag. Because there are so many walls in there, you can get lost in there easy. But no, we really didn't we figured we had 3 years to figure that out. And at the pace I'm moving, I wasn't even worried about it yet. And then somebody approached me a couple of weeks ago and said, yeah, that could be a perfect tenant. So, the library is looking at a 50-year lease. This group would also be looking at a very long lease. And they would both be, I think it would be a really good, knowing what's about to happen at the bypass with the Chlor Farms, I think it would be this could really create a great downtown area that will complement that area very well. So, but yes, we do have some potential tenants there.
Would you like to come back and talk to us another time? No, seriously.
I would be happy to, if this is stuff that you all find interesting and it's worth your all's time. I don't mind coming. This is kind of what I do. So either I'm doing it as mayor or I'm doing it designing networks and talking to people about cyber. If you ever want to talk about cybersecurity and how all that stuff is, I can talk about that too. But I think Rich could do that for you as well. But anyway, no, I'd be happy to come back. Maybe after we get the design for the summer, I could come back and we could throw it up on the screen and actually show you all what we're looking at putting in next to the park. So just one last thing, speaking of that on the park, you all have done so many wonderful projects, and I really do appreciate, the city really appreciates all the things you all have done. At this point, once that design comes back, I'm guessing we're gonna have a lot more. But I know Rich had said something about what else is coming, and I don't really have any good answer for what we have today. In 3 months, I'll have a whole nother list, I'm sure, of things that we want to do. So we'll kind of, if y'all just can be patient for a few months, I'm sure I will have lots of other opportunities. We're working with Udell Gardens to do a whole thing in front of the IGA / the courthouse and that front building. You know, where will we put trees? Are we going to put hanging pots? Are we going to hang stuff off the light poles to really make that a nicer environment? So that's stuff we're working on too. But again, I don't have any updates on what it's going to look like. I will at the end of the summer. So if you all want, I'd be happy to come back and show you all our designs once we get them, because it is pretty exciting.
How long will Dollar General, like, what's theirs?
So Walgreens bought that building, or bought that land and built that building. And after they bought it, obviously they moved out. They signed a lease with Dollar Tree. And I honestly don't have, that was a direct relation between the two of them. So nobody knows, or I don't know. We weren't privy to that conversation. So I really can't answer that. It wasn't, sometimes we have designs of what we want and sometimes things just happen. Unfortunately, Walgreens didn't really make any announcements until they were moving out. I think if they would have known what was about to happen with the courthouse there and with what's about to happen in the front, that would have been a perfect place for Walgreens to stay. They left 6 months too soon. So, and when I heard they were leaving, we talked to the general manager of the store and tried to get in touch with the corporate group. But in a company like Walgreens, they're so big that you don't turn that bus around. So, yes.
Anybody ask about utilities? Any thought to burying the utilities up there in Crestwood?
Yes. These are a lot of great questions. It is expensive. One of the things that we really liked about the design that we did last time, when we did the design 10 years ago, they showed us what the whole area would look like. And then he showed us a second set with all the utilities gone. And you don't realize how much is there until it's gone. And it was uncomprehendable how much better it looked with the utilities buried. So as part of his redesign, they're looking at kind of a downtown kind of restructuring and beautification, and they're going from the Maples Park to Crestwood, or to Crestwood Station. It's kind of the corridor they're looking at. And as part of that, I'm confident he will come back with the same thing of this is what it would look like without the utilities. And then we will look at trying to either all at once or over time. But yes, that is something we would love to get rid of. That's definitely something that you don't notice. I mean, you see it, but you don't really pay attention until you come through and it's gone. It's incredible how much better it looks. Yeah. Well, yeah, we all see the poles, but again, when you see the picture and it's all gone, it's really amazing how much better the community would look. So yes, that is something we're looking at as part of this design. Great questions. Y'all ask all the hard questions. I expected the sketchy gas station and the Railroad Avenue. Those are kind of the ones that come up every time I have a conversation. Very good. Anything else?
Thank you so much for coming.
Oh, you
This
are
was
welcome.
great, very
Good.
enlightening.
Good. Thank you very much.
Yeah, in 3 months, we will